So good morning, everyone. I want to thank you, first of all, and salute you. You are the brave, the proud, the people who went to my business session at 8:30 in the morning. When I first saw them put that at 8:30, I went, "Who? Are you mad at me? You don't like me anymore? Why did you do that to me? These people need to wake up." But actually, I can see you guys are pretty awake, so that's great. We actually think it's going to be a pretty fun session this morning. I'm trying to stay away from that microphone so we don't do the feedback game. We should have a great session this morning, and so the format this morning should be pretty good. We're going to start with some presentations on the Lync 2013 Forrester Consulting. Like all these words, every time I say it, John, it's going to be in a different order. But Lync 2013 Forrester Consulting TEI study. TEI, Total Economic Impact. I don't want to steal the explanation from one of our speakers, but this is one of the primary formats for initial understanding of cost and business value for Lync. So how many of you last night went to the TCO session that was held by my colleague at 3:30? Just curious if there's overlap. One. Wait, I need like binoculars to see you down there, by the way, sir. So just once in a while, just kind of could you move so we know that you haven't keeled over or anything like that? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, well, we will talk a little bit about what's the difference anyways, but so people can understand, because there's going to be a lot of economic assets announced both during the session and in the next few weeks, and so people will probably need to understand that. So let's talk about a little bit what we're going to do today. So first, we're going to go through the actual TI study methodology. I've brought Forrester Consulting in, which will be great, so you can have the man who actually wrote it and ask him lots of great questions. Secondly, I thought it'd be really helpful, right? So I'm Microsoft. I'm what y'all people call a vendor. And so obviously we have a viewpoint, and that's great, right? We're convicted about what we think is the value. But I think it also is helpful to have one of our partners talk about how they see this value conversation and how they execute it. I think it'll be really interesting. So that's why I've invited them here as well. I'm also going to have one of our most senior Microsoft salespeople in the field join us as well for the panel, which should be great. And so then we'll do that panel, and we'll have that conversation, and hopefully we'll have you out of here on time or even early. So hopefully you'll have some good questions for us. Before we get rolling, I think it's super important to understand where this work fits in, because I think you're going to hear over the next few days, and some of you have already heard it, TCO, comparing Lync to that other guy. Like, I love how we do that. Like, that other guy, like, come on. Who are we kidding? We know who the other guy is. And because I'm the compete lead, I'll say it. Cisco. That's exactly what we're talking about. And so it's important for customers. It's important for the field to understand how we see, and partners to understand how we see this comparison. But we're not going to be talking about competitors today in ours. And that's what the TI really is about. It's about understanding cost and benefit. And that's what that work is. So I put up here a little bit of guidance, like, so when is this thing actually used, or what's the conversation for? Well, we think typically the TI studies that are done by Forrester Consulting for us are used early. And so the question is really around why Lync or why UC. And that's what this asset tries to address. Like, it's to help people decide they're at a tipping point. Can we push them over and say, hey, you really should start looking deeper and deeper at UC for your company. But last night, like I said, there's a great session, and it's recorded, so you should go listen to it. There is TCO work being done, and that's a much more traditional comparison of us against the other guy. And you can go ahead and take a look at that. And that really is who. All right, so who should be at the table, or who are we comparing Lync to understand its value prop and its cost methodology? That's not work done by Forrester, but that's other consultants who have done that work for us. And then finally, there are other assets for deeper in. These are not necessarily public assets, so if you're a customer, typically what you'll need to do is ask a partner or one of your Microsoft field people to walk you through the actual tool. And really what that's about is mapping value to that specific business. So the TEI starts with, okay, here is a case study around value. And you say, interesting. Now let me understand against your competitors. That's the TCO work. And then finally, can you take all that work you've done and map it directly to my company with specific value? And that's what that's for. Okay, so that's the best part about being moderator. The translation is I don't have to do any slides. I just make other people do them. So I'm going to bring up actually an expert here. John, why don't you come on up? And John's going to walk us through the value prop. And also, John, I'll let you introduce yourself as well. Thanks, John.
Great, thank you. Good morning. I think Paul's confused, thanking all of you for coming out so early this morning. This is Vegas, so thank you for staying up so late to attend this session. Sorry about the monitor here. It's going to be a bit of a problem, but we'll see. So I'm with Forrester Consulting, which, as you could probably guess from the name, is part of Forrester Research. I'm part of the Total Economic Impact Group, which I tell people, and I know it's being recorded, and they'll hate I say, it's sort of a business case on steroids. We look at a lot more than just what is the cost and the benefit piece of this. I should be able to use PowerPoint. Let's go. Okay, so what is it? So we look at a few different areas. We look at, obviously, the benefits. What are the benefits to the organization? The costs. What does it cost to do this? Looking really at the hard costs. We focus a lot on the hard, what is actually coming in and out of the organization. Although we look at benefits that maybe can't be quantified as well. And then two areas we'll talk about briefly. Risk, which increases costs and decreases benefits, because as everybody knows, most IT projects never go on time or on budget. And lastly, flexibility. By doing something today, making this investment, what options do you have for the future? From a methodology standpoint, due diligence, spoke a lot with Microsoft people, looked at a lot of materials that exist, some of these calculators that Paul was referring to, did internal interviews with Microsoft folks, then interviewed 5 companies currently using Microsoft Lync, as well as we did a survey that we had 7 additional companies provide us feedback on that, inputs. Created a composite organization, so we didn't do a study, 5 different studies. We created a composite organization that has a lot of the characteristics of the companies that we interviewed, and then did the study around that, both the financial model and then the write-up. So let me just point out that this presentation is a summary of the actual study itself. So I recommend, and I know that Paul's going to be sending out the link to download and read the entire study. You'll see very clearly the calculations, how they were done, and you can use that to relate it to your own organization. Just out of curiosity, how many people in the room are actually customers or potential customers of Microsoft? Okay. Oh, great. If you all have questions, you can come to the front of the line over the Microsoft and partner people. So as I said, these are the areas that we looked at. I'll now go into some detail around what we had here. So just a little something around why were you looking for a new web conferencing solution? The old solution was end of life or not meeting the needs anymore, so needed a life cycle replacement. Mobility, with almost everybody I spoke with, mobility was a very large issue. I spoke with one company in Indonesia, in Jakarta, which officially has 20 million, and if you've been there, it's probably closer to 30 million, where just to get 1 mile could take 2 hours. So letting people work from home, from customer sites, from wherever was very important. Then lower total cost of ownership was important, and that was covered last night vis-a-vis your competitors. Paul alluded at Forrester, we don't, in these types of analyses, discuss competitors. So if you have competitor questions as part of this session, please direct it to the Microsoft people. So those were the main reasons. And you can see that the companies interviewed or surveyed was a wide range: electronics, manufacturing, telecoms, financial services, the education, nonprofit, and also sales and distribution. So a pretty wide swath of responses. And then which of the benefits have you seen or expect to see? Collaboration effectiveness, and we'll talk more about that later. Everybody had seen that, are the ones that responded to that question. Team efficiency, people have seen it or expect to see it. And then accessibility, getting to the tools that they need. And then the cost savings around telephony, IT, competitor-type products. So the companies that we interviewed, there's a global transportation company. I'm going to refer to my notes here to make sure I tell you the right things about this. It was for the North American portion of a global transportation company. They have 1,500 users, and one of the main things that they were doing was replacing their PBXs for voice communication. A translation and interpreter services company, mainly an online services company, as well as providing individual translators, that nature. Very distributed workforce. They had 5,000 users in 26 countries around the world, so it's about as distributed as you can get for a company of that size. And then I'm going to skip to the bottom right. It was actually one that I found very interesting. It was a special needs school, so it probably doesn't apply to a lot of people in here, and it was a small organization, but they teach kids that are basically almost blind. Yeah, and deaf, some of them, Helen Keller type scenario. And they were using Lync, they were customizing it to teach blind children remotely around the country how to use it. So I thought that was a very special story that they told me. We then had an energy company. This was the Singapore-based company, 3,000 users. They were replacing a lot of other solutions, competitor solutions that they had in place, as well as the PBX, and they moved all their users to IP phones or headsets and basically ripped out all their telephone systems. For them, federation was very important, working with their customers and their partners. And the last one is the architecture firm, which had 1,200 users in 24 locations around the world. They too were replacing their PBXs with using Lync for voice. And federation and Skype integration were very important for them. The person I interviewed said to me, I don't know why, but some of our customers insist on using Skype and nothing else. So for them, it was very important that Skype was a piece of this. So out of this, we defined the composite organization. I made it a mining company, headquartered in Singapore, where there's 3,000 out of 5,000 users. Much bigger company, but most people down in the mines don't actually require much in the way of communications of this nature. So there were 3,000 users in Singapore. The US headquarters had 750 users, and the European headquarters had 500. So that was 4,250 out of 5,000 users, the remainder of them being at sales offices, obviously at different mining or distribution transport point facilities. Management, people of that nature would be using Lync. The project goals: increase collaboration, reduce the total cost of ownership, and reduce the complexity. A lot of the companies that I spoke with had multiple point solutions, and it caused complexity, and that for user complexity as well as IT support complexity, and that reduced user adoption. Okay. So what was deployed? And this is at a very high level in terms of what the composite organization put in place. This was an on-premise solution in order to take advantage of the full voice integration, the PBX replacement, so it was on-premise. Singapore, US, European headquarters I discussed. They purchased the Lync 2013 plus CALs. Prior to that, they had existing Lync and Outlook licenses as part of the Enterprise CALs suite and the Office Professional Plus licenses that they had. In terms of the deployment, there were 4 physical servers that were virtualized to provide the SQL, the different virtual servers that were required, 2 PSTN gateways at the Singapore headquarters, and 2 survival branch appliances that also could be used for PSTN as well. And then lastly, IP phones and headsets were used as the phones were replaced. Now, there are some places in the world where you're not allowed to use IP telephony. In that case, obviously, PBXs would be left in place. So now to the benefits. There were 3 benefits that I quantified in this study. There were more that people discussed, but what I wanted to focus on were benefits that were incremental to a previous solution that was in place. So I didn't put in there, and they reduced travel costs, because everybody knows about that, and if you've done something else, a lot of that's been captured already. But the areas that we looked at, the first one was the elimination of other previous solutions. So specifically here, elimination of the PBXs and other web conferencing solutions. So there were solutions in place in the PBX that were end of life. In the initial period at the start when Lync was deployed, there was about $200,000 of replacement that would have had to take place for PBXs. And then in years 2, another $200,000, and in year 3, an additional $100,000 of PBX. in addition to that, of course, there's the ongoing maintenance that takes place with that. And every time that a location would either be opened or moved, there was a cost of putting in new PBXs and all the support that goes along with that. As well as existing web conferencing solutions were replaced, $100,000 worth in year 1, and that grew to $200,000 by year 3. The total risk-adjusted benefits, so I looked at it, I said, well, is the composite organization really reflective of what most organizations this size should expect? And based on those thoughts, those calculations, I reduced the benefit by 10% to make it more applicable to more of you in the room, hopefully, and more of the readers out there. And the total risk-adjusted benefits over the 3 years was $1.3 million US. The second was reduced telephony. That consisted of traditional long-distance charges assessed by the phone company, conference call services, so the usage charges associated with that, international roaming on mobile calls. The companies I spoke with that have a lot of international operations, this was huge for them. They had very large costs, and they also said that their employees that were traveling, even though they were no longer using their mobile phone in a traditional way for calling home or calling the office, that they actually had better connectivity or communication with their family while they were traveling. By being on Wi-Fi, they could do video or whatever else they wanted, so they actually felt more connected to their home office and to their family, even though they were weaned off of just dialing in the traditional way from their mobile phone. So once again, risk adjusted it, and the 3-year benefits were $1.7 million. In this study, you can look at all the tables, all the calculations, what individual components make it up, so please do take a look at that. I'll probably say that 1 or 2 more times today. And the third benefit area that we looked at was staffing optimization. So how do you get the right resource balance for the amount of work that really needs to take place? So the 3 areas of savings were around the PBX and previous communication, system administration. By year 2 of the study, 4 out of 10 FTE positions could be reassigned. So that could be a combination of moving people to other areas that are open, just giving them new assignments, eliminating new hiring for positions that are open or future positions required, and in some cases, letting people go. For the PBX, system administration, a lot of that was contractors. In international companies that have a lot of smaller offices, they'll use local contractors on a part-time basis to do PBX administration. So a lot of that was able to be eliminated. The secondary was the IT general support desk, which I'm not sure that was the best way to refer to it, but as opposed to like a Lync support desk, but just a general IT support, password resets, my computer's not working, things of that nature. By having improved collaboration and communication tools, the company was able to have more efficient work out of the help desk itself. So they were able to eliminate positions there as well. And then the last area is drilling specialists, because the composite organization is a mining company. But this one was very interesting in speaking with different companies that have a very distributed workforce through a lot of offices. It tends to be that if you have a specialist, you need them in that office in order to work with their colleagues, with their customers, activities of that nature. But by using Lync, they were able to consolidate those specialists. So, for example, the company in Indonesia that does oil and gas exploration, they had experts, slant drilling experts, that had to be at each drilling facility. But by using Lync in order to work with the local teams more effectively, they could consolidate into regional centers, which allowed them to have fewer of these specialists, but able to get the geographic breadth and depth required to support everybody in the field. So I would encourage you to think about your organization or your customers' organizations where they have very high value, specialized resources that maybe aren't working to full capacity because they work in these geographic silos, and think about how you can maybe restructure them to remove the geographic aspect and have them support more areas or different areas or expand their remit. So for the composite organization, these drilling specialists, we were able to reduce that by approximately half, 5 FTEs by year 3 of this study. As I said before, Not all these are headcount reduction. Some of them are reduction of contractors, elimination of future positions, open positions, redeployment, things of that nature, and possibly some headcount reduction as well. So putting the benefits all together, over the 3 years, the total risk-adjusted benefits came out to $6.8 million. You can see where the breakout was. The staffing optimization was about 55%. The other costs were 45% of the costs there. And this is somewhat representative of what I heard. There's other benefits that we didn't put in the study, and we'll take a look at some of those. General user productivity. It's one that we see a lot, and probably when I was doing studies of this nature 5 years ago, I put in productivity benefit. Well, all 5,000 users are getting 5% of their time back, and their cost is $50 an hour. That comes out to $1 billion or whatever it is. But we've moved beyond that now. So productivity is important, and all the companies I spoke with were getting productivity gains out of it. But what you need to think about is how do you translate that soft benefit into hard benefits through the example that I gave of the staffing optimization, or can you close more deals? Can you close more deals more quickly? Can you bring new product to market? So think about how these productivity and efficiency gains actually translate into real dollars to the organization and try and quantify that. So from the survey, some of the things that we heard around how teams are becoming more efficient, getting access to information, be it from a repository, be it from, in most of the case, finding the colleague that knows the answer. That's always the big one, the informal information channels in a company. That Lync helped with that. Reducing process costs, which can obviously reduce costs, can reduce time to market, can improve sales cycles. Decision making, risk of not having the latest information for salespeople, that's often a very huge risk. And then just improve team communication to make teams work better together, more harmoniously. So that's it for the benefits. On the cost side, we'll just go through, we'll go clockwise. We'll start with the labor deployment. So the initial deployment took 27 weeks. There were 3 internal full-time equivalent resources working on that. And then 3 also in ongoing support, supporting around the world. So obviously not someone at each location, but 1 at each of the global headquarters supporting the different areas out there. From professional services, the implementation aspect of it, that obviously lasted the same period of time, the 27 weeks. That made up $125,000 of that ongoing support contract, providing Tier 2, Tier 3 support. Obviously, I can't log in. Those types of things were supported internally. But the more in-depth support for a professional services organization was $90,000 a year. Training was $75,000 in the initial period, and then some ongoing training, both as new users are brought online and as new features are brought out there, and also to train the technology teams as well. And we actually have someone from a professional service organization who will speak right after me, Anthony, so he might have more thoughts on this aspect, as well as his session later today. Hardware, so there are 4 servers that were virtualized for the Windows, the Lync, and the SQL servers that were required, 2 PSTN gateways, 2 survivable branch appliances, and then the headphones and headsets. 70% of the users went to headsets and 30% to IP phones. Software, the Microsoft licenses, I'll point out firstly, always talk with your Microsoft rep if you're a customer and figure out what the licenses are, because they can be confusing at times. But they, as I said earlier, they already had the Enterprise CAL and Office Professional Plus in place, which provided them some of the licenses they needed. These are the assumptions. They already had Active Directory and they had Exchange in place. We use standard pricing for EAEs with 3-year software assurance. And that made up the license component. And the last one was additional bandwidth. Obviously, if you're moving a lot of your voice onto the internet, or if you're adding a lot of video, that's going to go up. This was especially pronounced at the 3 main offices that had thousands or hundreds of users. But it was an issue every place. They just had to make allowances for that. So consider your bandwidth requirements. Yes? 5,000. It increased by about 200 a year, but 5,000. So just think about your bandwidth requirements. Obviously, if you're speccing out a new office, you want to make sure that you can support that. So that's the cost piece. So very quickly on risk and flexibility, I want to get to the panel discussion and to Anthony. So we use risk, as I said, to make this more relatable to you. Basically, we increase costs and reduce benefits. That changes the net present value, the ROI, also affects the payback period as well. Basically, pushes it all out further. So the adjustments that we made, and we reviewed those in the benefits piece, but each of the benefits was reduced by 10%, and the costs you could see ranged between 10% for implementation, the internal labor. That can vary a lot depending on what internal skills you have, how resource constrained you are. You might use more professional services, you might use less. And software licenses, I didn't risk adjust at all since we were using the sort of the general license costs out there without any special discounts or anything of that nature. Lastly, flexibility, an option for creating future value based on your investment today. So if you won at the craps table last night, you have an option to put it to better use today to win more money or give it back to the casino. I did not include any flexibility benefits in the study itself, although customers talked about the things they want to do in the future. So some of the things that they did talk about that create more flexibility and an inherently more flexible organization was something that they spoke about a lot. So real-time collaboration, mobile working, be able to work from more places more efficiently. That was very important. One person said to me that flexible working is the biggest benefit we've realized. So one company, that's their biggest benefit. We didn't include it in this study in its entirety because it's hard to put a dollar value or euro value around. And some of the future opportunities that the customers were talking about that I interviewed, using Lync for telepresence rooms, which obviously gives an opportunity to eliminate a lot of costs in that area, improved Skype integration or tighter Skype integration, and SharePoint integration. A few companies talked about that they'd really like to be doing in the future. So just to wrap up, what did the numbers all come to? Return on investment of 79%, an internal rate of return of 113%, payback period of 14 months, and the NPV was $2.5 million, or about $500 per user. And you can see that just the running cost benefit total over the 3 years, not being discounted, came up with a net gain of $3.3 million. So thank you for listening so late in the night. I appreciate your participation. And I'll now ask Anthony to speak for a few minutes, and then we'll get to the panel.
Cheers, thanks, mate. Good morning, everybody. My name's Anthony Vitnell. I'm the Microsoft Lync lead for Dimension Data here in the Americas, and I'm just going to spend a few minutes to just give a little bit of a different perspective about what I do day in, day out, working with customers through developing the ROI and the TEI, right through to the actual implementation and actually realizing these benefits. So who is Dimension Data? So just really quickly, the sales slide. We were Microsoft's Partner of the Year for Communications in 2013, and that was based on the work that we've been doing with our clients here in the US and globally around designing, deploying, and supporting global Lync voice rollouts. So the perspective that I come from when talking about TEI and these kind of figures is really around PBX replacement. So quick show of hands, who in here is looking at Lync from a PBX replacement perspective, looking at ripping out their PBXs? Only a few. Who here's already ripped out their PBXs and is using Lync Voice as their primary system? Fantastic. I would expect Microsoft to have their hand up at that point. So just a couple of other things about Dimension Data. We've made a really big investment in the Lync Masters program. And so we've got more Lync Masters than any other organization outside of Microsoft. We're really sad that Microsoft decided to discontinue that program. We had a number of people that were ramping up to go through that. So we're hoping that something comes out as a replacement. But in terms of, it's a big investment that we made in terms of being able to make sure when working with our clients, we're able to bring the best and brightest to the table. So how do we approach TEI or ROI or TCO, all of these different acronyms? So the way that I generally try to approach this with clients is really looking at real dollar savings. And I think, the slides that we went through before is a really good example of some hard dollar savings. Because I think that's important. When we talk about productivity savings and things like that, it doesn't get us anywhere. We can go and say we're going to save, what did you say, $1 billion, of people's time, but that, we can't get any justification, we can't get any budget for that. So we really need to look at the real hard dollar savings that we're going to get. But what's important, and where I spend a lot of my time working with customers, is trying to understand what the real costs are today. Many times I come in and a client has already put together their budgets and their expectations of savings, but they haven't looked at everything. That's why it was really good to see in the TEI study things like implementation costs, support costs, hardware costs, additional bandwidth. These are the sort of things that people often forget about when trying to develop their business case. And if you don't look at the complete picture, you're setting yourself up for failure. Because if you go to your management team and say, I'm going to save you $3 million, but then you only come in and you save them $2 million, they're going to come after you and say, where's that other $1 million? Not, thank you for saving me $2 million. So we need to plan up front and really look at what all those cost drivers are. Things like, what systems are we going to turn off? If we're looking at Lync, we can turn off things like same time, maybe third-party conferencing systems, obviously the support contracts, but other things. I went in and was meeting with one large client a couple of years back, and I still remember this vividly in my mind. We had a big room. There was about 30 people in the room going around doing introductions, and this lady put her hand up and she said, I run the team that manages patching. And then there were 6 other people that said, I patch phone lines. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like, wow. That is crazy that there are people that their job in this large global organization is just to go and pull cables. I'm thinking, you guys better get on board, because that's a task that's going away. So, so looking at those things, it is not necessarily that we're going to, get rid of those people, but they're going to be repurposed, and they're going to be looking at different things. But those are costs that we need to look at, right? The people that are out there, patching cables, that's cost savings opportunities. Another area where I see people struggle, in terms of when they develop their budgets and their business plans, is they don't look at the total cost of what Lync will be. On one of the slides that Jonathan had up, I think the software licenses are 20-30%, somewhere around there is typically what I see from a Lync deployment. It's the devices, the implementation, support contracts. People often forget that this is a Lync voice system, and you need to look at it from a support perspective a little bit differently to maybe how you look at Exchange. Because with Exchange today, if it goes down with cache mode and all of these things, users aren't really impacted. But if voice goes down and people can't make phone calls, then it's a totally different situation. So you need to look at having your third-party support contracts in place. So they don't necessarily go away. Just because you're getting rid of your Avaya or your Nortel or whatever existing PBX you have, you still need to have that 24/7 break-fix support available for you. And looking at your deployment costs as well. When we look at developing an ROI or a budget, we look at these figures and we say, okay, this is what the saving is going to be over a set number of years. But how long is it going to take us before we realize those savings? I think in the reference there was, 24 weeks in your example from a deployment for the 5,000 users. It's pretty typical for the large deployments to sometimes spend multiple years. So how does that impact your business case and the savings that you're expecting? Because it's pretty, we do a lot of large global deployments where we can do, a run rate of a couple of thousand handsets a month. But if you've got 30,000 handsets, then that's still over 12 months. So that's really going to impact your financial justification. So you need to make sure that you look at the complete picture of all of the savings that you can get, and then all of the cost drivers you're going to have, so that you can really develop that accurate picture of what those numbers are going to look like. So I just want to give you a real quick example here of a TEI assessment we did for one of our clients. There were about 3,000 users. We're doing PBX replacement, ripping out an existing Avaya system. And this is just a summary of some of the savings that they got. So this is real savings, real dollars, a real live customer. So in this particular example, over 3 years, it was a $1.7 million saving for about 3,000 users. So that's a pretty significant saving, and the payback period for them was actually under 10 months. And that was really aggressive, the deployment timeline. There was a lot of utilization of professional services from Dimension Data to accelerate that deployment. Because another thing that you need to look at when you're building your business case is, if we're looking at, doing an internal deployment yourselves, that's certainly something that you can do, but someone like an expert like Dimension Data that does this as our bread and butter, we can help accelerate that timeline and get those savings quicker. So in this instance, Dimension Data sort of did the whole design, deployment, implementation, support, and we actually manage this environment as well. But some pretty significant savings on a real customer for a pretty small number of users. So for those of you that have got larger user counts, you're going to be able to see exponential sort of growth in these savings. So that was really all I had for those 3 slides. I just wanted to give you a quick little taste, and then I think we're going to open it up for questions now.
Hey, great. Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you very much. I didn't get a chance to thank John. So hopefully we've had a bit of a perspective from consulting analyst on the overall project, and then I wanted Anthony to do a little bit of the rubber meets the road kind of moment here of actually having a partner. And so now's the fun part where we get to play the panel, and you get to ask us hard questions, or hopefully not too hard. I'm pretty sure I'm going to end up with the hard ones. There is a third person in the room I haven't had a chance to introduce yet. Jeff, would you stand up, please, and stop being so shy? Turn around so they can recognize you and get mad at you later at the conference. This is Jeff Salvador. I asked him to join us as well. He's not presenting, but he is a senior Microsoft salesperson, and so I think really what we want to do up here is give you a perspective of a neutral-based perspective from Forrester Consulting. I want to give you a partner-based perspective and then be able to give you the Microsoft perspective. So with that, I have a pay-it-forward ask of you. So we record these. I know that doesn't do you any good because you came to the room and listened. Thank you very much. However, there's lots of other people at the conference who didn't come to the room. And so if you sit in the back and turn yourself sideways like that, nobody can hear you. So I'm going to ask you to get up or at least wave at me, and I will run at you full speed, which can be a scary experience. I will hand you this microphone in my hand, and you can have a conversation. But I do need to record you, and I will pester you incessantly, whether you're a customer, partner, or a Microsoft employee trying to ask questions about the TEI. And also, I'll ask you another thing right now, and I'll remind you again later. Pay it forward. If this session was valuable, give us a review. If this session sucked, give us a review. Basically, give us a review, because what happens when you don't review? You've already voted, and we don't want you to do that. So we want you to tell us if we need to keep doing these kind of sessions. Because this Lync conference is all about, a lot about product, which is the right approach. But these tracks as well around business value are very helpful. So if you can, let us know that this was valuable to you. So with that, are there any questions? And by the way, a couple additional motivations. Number one, I have these cute little $10 Skype cards. So if you're a Skyper or want to be, and you ask a question, the first few of you who were able to give me a question, I'll give you a card regardless of the question. And number two, that was the carrot. The stick is, I have questions, and I'll start asking myself questions, and it'll be very strange. So your choice, what you'd like to do, A, B, or C. I hope you choose to get up and ask a question. So questions about the study or how we did it, or comments are acceptable as well if you want to say, there's something missing here. All right, shy people. I'm going to punish you. Okay.
Let's say at the very least 2 clients. How does that factor in from a TCO or ROI perspective? If you had dollar numbers, that would be great.
Sure. So I'll take that question and start off. So really, when we focus on things, we're really looking at the real hard dollars, right? So if there's often a duplication of costs from a licensing perspective to have 2 solutions. There is also a duplication around the support because you've got to send your support staff to 2 different sets of training, so between 2 different vendors. And The end user implication, that's a harder sort of number to quantify because that's one of those fuzzy productivity numbers, so it's a lot harder. So we look at the hardware, software costs, and then the increased support costs that would introduce into the environment.
Yeah, I would just, especially on the license side, obviously, and any hardware requirements, it's multiplicative. So if you have 2 solutions, it's generally twice as much. If you have 3 solutions, 3 times as much. From an internal support and staffing, they tend to support multiple solutions, but every additional solution is probably creating 50% more from an FTE requirement than you would otherwise be looking at. And as you get into geographic separation, or multiple offices around the world, that just increases complexity. I would just add from a user adoption, if you have a lot of solutions and it's very complicated to make them all work, people will just pick up the mobile phone and call somebody.
Exactly.
That'll happen a lot.
So the whole point of going with the UC design and solution is it just goes nowhere, right?
User adoption is really probably a lot more important than we generally give it credit for in terms of simplifying the user experience and the support and corresponding reliability as well.
Got it. Thank you. The 50% number was especially what I was looking for in terms of additional overhead or manpower that you need to add.
Great.
Thanks.
Good question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Oh, great. We have another question over here. Because otherwise I was about to pull one out of my stack and it wasn't going to be pretty.
It would be great to forklift PBX, but we don't always have that opportunity.
Right.
So more than often in large organizations, for large campus, you have a volunteer group, for instance, and things can be gradual. How does the hard dollar value look like for the savings in these cases? Talk about a subgroup. Mm-hmm. You're not removing PBXs, but you are removing ports, basically. So does that show any value?
So, you mean if there's no PBX replacement, is there still a value to it?
Or I think maybe you're alluding to like a hybrid approach where you're not ripping out all the PBX infrastructure at once, but you're on a rolling approach to it.
Yeah, and most organizations probably do a hybrid approach. Some offices, they're not going to move everything right away. And as I said earlier, certain countries, India, for example, can't really go all IP telephony. So they are going to be leaving in place. The PBX savings, obviously, are diminished, but there may be elimination of other solutions as well. So there is a reduction in the net benefits if you're not eliminating all your PBX costs. But the benefits, from what I heard and what I wrote, there's still the ROI is still there, and the net benefits, even if you're not removing your PBX.
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, I think that's. I'm sorry, I was going to comment on it as well. And understand too, we built a model, so it's a sliding scale, right? So the idea is, obviously, I won't be shy about this. I won't be embarrassed to say that we built a model and then we tried to show the most optimized portion of the model, right? We realized that again, it's a rubber meets the road moment, right? That's why we have the partner here. When you apply the model, you're going to have to think about the sliding scale. In other words, think about your company or your customer, what position they're in. Obviously, we've signaled in this model that because it's a model, we want to show the best possible outcome. You're going to have to apply real-world mechanics to it and say, you know what, we're going to slide back that benefit calculation just a little bit because we know that we're not going to get 100% PBX removal instantly on day one and things like that. So there'll be some adjustments.
Just as a reference point, you'll read in the study, of the over $6 million, almost $7 million in total benefits, about 800,000 of that was PBX related. So if you're not realizing all of that early on, it's still a small piece of the overall pie.
I'll just add, I'd say in those cases, you're going to see the reduced ports, so reduced maintenance and costs there, but also the productivity gains of when you're adding that single client and that work from anywhere experience, where if you're tethered to a traditional PBX and phone, when you introduce Lync, even integrated to the PBX, offers you some new productivity benefits. Yeah, some soft costs. So it may not be applicable in terms of what you're trying to do with the business case, but it's something that you should certainly consider as you're looking at it.
Did you give him a Skype card?
Oh, I did not. I'm going to hand this microphone to this gentleman next to me. Oh, thanks, Joe. Yep. And I guess Raj Gopalakrishnan is trying to get a Skype card. So you're going to have to wait until like real customers, Raj. Okay, thanks. Okay, we have another question over here.
Hi. This is a question about scalability. We're a small shop, 50 Lync users. How would the model scale down to that size? would we still see something on a TI of around $500? Or equivalent to
Yes.
the
So obviously both pieces scale. It's not exactly a direct scale going down, but I spoke with companies of varying sizes from around 1,500 users up to 5,000 plus. The school was about 50 users, but they weren't so worried about the ROI of this. They're worried about education. But it does scale up or down. I would say that the net benefits per user should be around comparable. Personally, I think probably the payback period would be shorter in a small organization. Your deployment time is going to be a lot less, and the complexity is a lot less. So I would think you would see the break-even point much quicker and probably a net benefit level similar. I don't know in your experience with smaller businesses.
I mean, we typically focus on the larger global multinationals, but there is one particular client that I have. Did you say you had 50 seats? So we did do a deployment for a customer that had 150. That's the smallest one that I've had interaction with. And their payback period was under 12 months as well. I don't remember the exact specifics on that one because it was back with Lync 2010, but they certainly did see the value and were able to justify that investment for them as well.
It would also probably depend on if it's an on-premise or cloud-based solution. If it's all cloud-based, it can be a very simple deployment for you. Okay. So
I'd say the other part of that is in the study, you'll see the areas of consideration. So the calculations are there for the composite org of 5,000 users, but all of the areas of consideration would be the same for the organization, just putting your numbers in there to come up with what that benefit would look like.
Yeah, and I think that gives me a good chance to also plug. There is a tool, so if for customers, you'll have to ask a partner or your Microsoft field people to help you with it. But there is a tool available so you can actually run through your numbers as well. So this idea, again, of the TI is to get you thinking about it and then apply it to your specific situation. And then we have a question right here as well.
Thanks. It's probably a bit of a two-part question. So one in the example, which makes sense in ripping out PABX, whether you've taken travel benefits or savings in there in bringing technology in. And secondly, does it stack up in the same numbers for what I'd call a greenfield site? So brand new building, you would have put a PABX in traditionally. Now you're going to go straight for Lync and all the voice integration. Do the numbers stack up in the same way, or do you see a reduced benefit in that scenario?
Sure. So I'll take that one real quickly, and then if you want to add in. So the first part of the question, I personally don't look at travel savings when trying to develop something like this because it's very hard to quantify. And very hard to justify and then track and ensure that you have actually reduced travel. When we did our internal deployment at Dimension Data and we integrated Lync with our room-based video conferencing systems, that was right before the economic crash in 2008. So we had the tools and technologies to stop traveling but to still do business. So in that instance, we did see a massive reduction in travel. But that's generally not something that I try to incorporate into these because it's a bit harder to quantify because there is still travel that some people are going to do, and so it's hard to tie that back to Lync. The second part of your question regarding how does this stack up against greenfields? So often in what I'm part of my day job is to work with clients to help them understand and to compare the cost of Lync versus another solution to try to make that justification from a greenfield, whether it be a new site or a new building or a complete new sort of fit out. And we've certainly seen that Lync stacks up from a numbers perspective to be down at the lower end of the stack from a pricing perspective for the overall total cost.
I would just add, in this study specifically, we did not include travel savings for the reasons Anthony mentioned also. A lot of those benefits have already been realized, and I was looking at incremental benefits associated with Lync 2013. I did include new offices opening or offices moving for the future PBX savings of not putting into those greenfield locations.
I was going to say on the greenfield, the other area that may fall under the hardware is maybe not pulling wire to the desk, right? Moving complete wireless, which may be another area of savings, potential cost avoidance as you're moving into these greenfield things. Not captured in the studies mentioned, but
that's a really
areas
good
where you
point.
can put in the hardware.
Yeah, we actually do have some clients that are doing, office of the future sort of build outs, and they're going completely wireless. So they save the cost of running Cat6 cable down to all of the desks. So that's certainly another consideration that can help drive down costs for new buildings.
I had a question. Sorry if I missed it. I was slightly distracted earlier. But did you talk to any benefits or cost savings from going where a Lync 2010 shop going to a fully integrated 2013 and maybe with Exchange 213 and all that? Is there some architectural savings that you looked at or saw?
I let the Microsoft guys speak to the architectural piece. The basic premise was moving from a Lync 2010 or better up to 2013. So the benefits, especially around voice savings, a lot of that was incremental, specific to 2013. From an architectural standpoint, I'll let Paul address that.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So, for the study, the one challenge is, so the great news is we build a model. The bad news is we build a model, right? And so there's always going to be something in the model that doesn't match a particular scenario or situation you have. So I would say the model is optimized for a little bit more PBX replacement, but as John pointed out, that's a fairly small amount of the model. So I think it still applies pretty well. The incremental benefits obviously are there as well, and I think probably that's actually a good follow-on for us to think about, which is what is the real 2010 to 2013 move? Yeah. What we find is that this is a huge, typically, and again, I've brought a guy in to be the field guy, but I'm going to act like I'm one. Typically from the corp perspective or the business group perspective on Lync, it still feels a lot like a greenfield, right? Everything's still brand new for Lync. So we typically find that customers, while we do have customers obviously upgrading, but we still see a lot of customers who are either like in a departmental mode with Lync or something like that, and only IM and presence in pockets in the organization. And so it ends up still being quite a bit of an upgrade. I don't know, Jeff, if you have any feelings on it.
I'd say that the areas that I see from the business case to go from 2010 to 2013 are around some of the new feature functionality that were part of 2013. So like the Lync room systems, for example. So removing future costs of video equipment, for example, moving to a Lync room system. The mobile experience, so reducing the international roaming charges and whatnot. The mobile experience in 2013 is significantly better than in 2010 and provide just some different capabilities. So there are different capabilities that are available in 2013, right, with the new product that will also offer you some cost savings opportunities.
Now your environment, though, with the environment, there's you have to stand up a 2013 environment and then basically move your users across. So you've got some cert issues and an investment in either virtual or physical hardware.
Yep.
So that's got to offset whatever savings going from 10 to 13.
I see you'll see the initial investment for the server infrastructure and the services to get the migration going, but at that point you also is where you'll start to see the value come in.
Thanks.
Right.
Great. I don't want to put any pressure on the other side of the room, but this side of the room is kind of kicking your butt right now. They got questions, and you guys over there are like the quiet section. I can barely see you. No, you're actually on this side, but we'll get to you next.
We've helped several companies install Lync, and one of the unexpected benefits we experienced after the fact was companies that had a significant mobile workforce now were making use of Lync instead of their cell phones, and we've had a few companies even go in and renegotiate cell phone contracts to lesser minutes because of Lync's usage. Have you seen something similar, and have you been able to put an ROI around such occurrences?
I think it's for you, Anthony.
That's for me. I was going to let one of you guys take that. So, so certainly we've actually seen some different scenarios as well. That we've actually, once Lync has been deployed, in the corporate offices, we've seen them make the decision to actually deploy Lync in their retail outlets. So replacing the phone lines and the POTS lines that were configured in a number of retail outlets. So that was a big unexpected cost-saving benefit because there was thousands of stores or retail outlets that had existing analog lines and things like that had to be ripped out. As for the cell phone piece, that one's a little bit tricky in that not every organization provides corporate cell phones. So it's for example, the organization that I work for, Dimension Data, we provide our own cell phones and the company reimburses us for it. So in that instance, there isn't the opportunity for us to take advantage of that. I have seen some clients definitely be able to see the reduction in minutes and then, as you say, go back and renegotiate that. But I haven't seen any common element or common theme that would allow us to sort of put some, specific numbers that could be replicated across other organisations.
I would just add for international roaming that the reimbursement for that, if you're traveling internationally and not using your mobile phone, which can add up pretty quickly,
Yeah, definitely.
that decreases considerably.
Yeah.
I usually reference that as additional benefit that we're not capturing, right? Potential to reduce the cell phone minutes across the board. So
It's a great point, though. I'm thinking of the BVA tool and having that. I don't know if that's reflected properly in that very specific tool to capture that.
Firstly, yeah. Thanks for the presentation. It was great. I got a couple of questions, a two-part question. Firstly, the benefits, were they projected or were they actuals?
The benefits.
Yeah.
Well, it was a composite organization. So it was projected, and the companies that I interviewed, it's Lync 2013, it's 2014. So some of the benefits are from Lync 2010 moving forward, in which case there could be 3 years. So the companies I spoke with, some have been using Lync for a long time, some for not as long a period of time. So it's a blend of the two.
And well, I suppose the second part is not valid now, but I was going to say for actuals, how do the customer organisations you talk to make sure that the non-IT benefits follow through to the P&L, to the bottom line? How do they measure that?
You mean in terms of how they actually made sure that it
like
went through?
the labour redeployment or cost avoidance charges? How do the implementation team actually measure that they got those?
Right.
That's a good question. So what I've seen is that typically, for an initiative and a program of this size, there is a financial justification that the internal team needs to do to finance. And then what I've seen is finance keeps them honest to that. Mm-hmm. In their budgets moving forward, they said, you're going to save me this. That's why I was talking about, if we say we're going to save 3 million, but we only save 2 million, we get beaten up. We don't get a pat on the back for saving 2. We get beaten up that we didn't save 3. So that's why it's important to understand that up front, because typically we see the finance team reflects that in the budgets for the next year. And if you said you only need to spend $500,000 a year on a certain capability, then that's all you're going to have in your next budget.
So presumably, as part of the business case, you have to go out and talk to the other functions which are going to do those later savings and say, hey guys, you understand that your budget is going to drop by X, and get them to buy off on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I come from a prior Forrester system integration, IT consultancy background, worked with big companies like British Telecom. And the key with everything with this is build the business case, get the individual, whoever owns that line item has to sign off on it, and then management has to hold them accountable for the benefit. Otherwise, projects tend to just drag on and run over and you don't get the benefit. So it's a change management issue and an accountability issue that if you're from a professional services organization, obviously help your customer build that in because you want them to realize the benefits if they do more work in the future.
Thank you.
Good question, keeping us honest.
I think you've got one.
Is there another one back here? Oh, great.
I really would love one from the other side, though. I feel really rude standing on this side. I want to come face you guys.
Anthony, I'm worried that you guys are all kind of cantered this way a little bit. I think you guys need to just make a little more eye contact with those guys over there. They'll feel a lot of social pressure.
Right here, there's the bright lights, though, so I kind of get blinded.
Did any of the companies that you're working with integrate with business processes and do CEBP applications? And were you able to identify the ROI or benefits from that and quantify it?
The ones that I interviewed had not. It was one of the things, the flexibility they were looking to do in the future. Obviously, SharePoint is a part of that going forward. But the ones I had looked at, that was a flexibility benefit. I don't know if you've worked with any.
Unfortunately, what I've been finding is not enough people are diving into CEBP. It's unfortunate. Everybody wants to talk about it. Everybody's excited about it. But unfortunately, I haven't found many customers that are actually building that into their business processes. And it's unfortunate because that is a huge element of cost savings. And where we have seen it is in the contact centers and the call centers because that's, they understand that. So when we replace their existing contact center with a Lync contact center, they're already, in that mindset of, integration, screen pops, pulling data and things like that. So it's a lot easier to do. I have seen a number of, clients that have put budget in and put that into their roadmap to develop applications and build that in to, to their custom service desks and things like that. But I haven't yet, I don't personally have any reference points to quantify any savings there.
Yeah, I'd just say, Sam, it's usually pretty specific to the customer organization on the CEBP process that they're building into to reduce time to whatever that they're building that for. So to quantify that, I think it's specific to that specific development effort, but it's something definitely that should be considered as part of that business case as you're making that internally, right, to understand what that is and what the benefit looks like.
Yeah, and just for everybody else in the room, CEBP, in case you're not familiar, customer-enabled business processes, and really what we're talking about is integrating using various different APIs within Lync to enhance your the usage of Lync and to get it integrated into apps, in case you're wondering. I'll just add from a business owner perspective as being part of the Lync business group, we made a conscious decision in the last couple of years to really focus our teams and our partners on voice. And so that seemed to be the low-hanging fruit to us, and so you'll see a lot of our motions were around that. That doesn't take away at all from CBP, because actually we're a little frustrated because we know we have a lot of great work being done by Microsoft engineering to provide these different things. I mean, the acronym police will get me, but UCWA, the Lync APIs, you even heard about Gurdeep talk about JLink. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And so I think you'll see us begin to shift a little bit on that too. It's like we're getting to, it's always it's a constrained marketing pipe, right? How many messages can we jam in this pipe before the customer just goes, I don't want to hear it anymore? So we have to be very careful about how we message. But I think you'll find us leveling that out a little bit. Maybe just ever so slightly slowing down the voice drumbeat and saying, hey, there are other great areas to explore value with Lync. Other questions?
This side of the room. We've got some
Right,
Skype cards.
I'm just going to walk over here and stand in front of somebody and just be really because you guys can tell I'm shy. I'm a retiring kind of guy. So, okay, no, these guys, they're pretty tough, Anthony. The social pressure's not working. So.
Nah, it was worth a shot.
If there are no other questions, actually, I have one that came in actually earlier. I asked our field to give us questions before we got here in case you guys actually have asked a lot of great questions. But I want to point out the study was focused on-premise. I'm surprised nobody, kind of dinged us for that. Like, oh, look, you guys are talking on-prem while 99% of everybody else is waving their hands in the cloud. So there is actually a question I think I might throw at Jeff or something about how do you think about the value or the business messages and the value prop when customers really are thinking about the cloud a lot as opposed to on-prem? You could ask anything harder, Jeff? Is that?
No, I think it's really what technologies you're looking to adopt and what that timeline looks like. So with the cloud today, there's not the full PBX replacement, at least in Office 365 in our data centers. So that drives it more to an on-premise discussion. So I think there are different benefits as you look to move your physical infrastructure to Office 365 or to the cloud data centers. But when we're talking about voice specifically, it drives it back to an on-premises discussion. I think is why we're focused here.
Yeah, and it is a study where we've actually tried to, honestly and very conscientiously, and whenever I tried to make John do things otherwise, he pounded me around my ears until I agreed with him. But we tried to actually pick real world and kind of value and benefits. Like for instance, we chose very consciously not to include that travel benefit, which is something everybody in the industry puts on their thing. Like first thing, travel savings cost. Like, God, we have pounded that thing into the ground. I mean, it's really, most customers have probably optimized one way or other on that, on their travel expenses. And if you need that, then you can add that back in and calculate it as part of your TI to your customer, or if you're a customer, figuring that in. But really, so we've tried to sort of focus on that. And that's why we stayed away from the cloud for this pass. I'm fairly certain this will probably be the last time you'll see us do a pure on-prem story. The next time we build one of these models and work with a consulting firm like Forrester, it'll absolutely be a lot more cloud-loaded. And I will point out that my colleague Barry Castle is working on that TCO we talked about at the beginning of the session, and that includes a hybrid option in there, so you can really do a cloud analysis if you want as well. So the data's out there definitely.
I'll be around today, so grab me if you want to discuss. I'll be at the club tonight for the party. Grab me then, but have a drink for me at that point. But feel free to grab me. I think in the presentation, my email address is there. You can reach out to me that way as well. So thank you.
Great. So on behalf of everyone here, I want to thank my panel today for doing it. And I'd like to ask all you guys, if you could, just show them your appreciation as well.